The next IPv6 address type we're going to cover is EUI-64. EUI-64 is a feature with IPv6 where IPv6 addresses can be automatically generated using a host's MAC address. As you can see here in this slide, at the bottom you can see the 64 bits, which would be the host address for an IPv6 address, and you can see that part of it is derived from a MAC address. And then sandwiched in the middle is always going to be FFFE. So basically, besides sandwiching FFFE smack dab in the middle of the host part of that IPv6 address, it takes the first part of the MAC address, and as you can see, sends it down to the first part of the generated host address. And one unique thing it does here is it flips the 7th bit in the MAC address. So as you can see here, the first 7 bits right here are sent down, and then the original 7th bit is 0, as you can see here. So that's flipped from a 0 to a 1, which changes the value to be 2. And then at the end, nothing special here. It just takes the second half of the MAC address and sends it down to complete the EUI-64 generated IPv6 address. So why would you use EUI-64 addressing? Well, the router will use this primarily for link local addressing. So just by simply enabling IPv6 on an interface, the router will generate link local addresses with the EUI-64 format. So let me show you here. Earlier I configured a global unicast address on this interface, which essentially enabled IPv6 for it. And here it generated a link local address, and just by seeing the FFFE in the middle of the host portion of the address, that tells me that it used the EUI-64 format. So if we look at the MAC address for this interface, alright, so here you can see the MAC address for this interface was CA01, 3F, and then AC and all zeros. Okay, so if we look up here in the host portion of the address, we have C8, which that's different because remember that 7th bit is flipped. So C801-3F, which is the first half of the MAC address, FFFE, and then the second half of our MAC address, which is AC, all zeros, and it just excluded the leading zeros here, which is why it's only 1 0. So that's one primary example of using EUI-64 addressing. A little bit about link local addresses. You'll notice that the address starts with FE80, : That actually defines the link local address space. So the first 64 bits of all link local addresses will always be FE80, : These addresses are local to a physical link. Their main purpose is for automatic router configurations and neighbor discovery, which we'll get into more later on in this course. So outside of link local addresses using EUI-64, you can actually configure static EUI-64 addresses on your router interfaces if you wanted to. So if you didn't care what host address your device was getting and you weren't tracking your addresses, you could simply just go IPv6 address, give it a network. So let's say, let's go like this, /64, and then EUI-64. And that's going to just take this network and my MAC address and spit out an EUI-64 IPv6 address. So there you go. We got the same address as our link local, except the first 64 bits were defined as using this network instead of the link local address space.